Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum. My name is Lara Finandita. I'm from 5BD class with research methodology subject. And this week, I'm back to explain about sampling. What are we going to discuss? The first is definition of sampling. Second, population versus sample. Third, sampling frame. 4. Probability sampling method. 5. Non-probability sampling method. And the last, difference between probability sampling and non-probability sampling method. First, definition of sampling. Sampling is a method that allows researchers to infer information about a population based on results from a subset of the population, without having to investigate every individual. Example, if a drug manufacturer would like to research the adverse side effect of a drug on the country's population, it is almost impossible to conduct a research study that involves everyone. In this case, the researcher decides a sample of people from each demographic and then researcher them giving indicate feedback on the drug's behavior. Second is population versus sample. The population is the entire group that you want to draw conclusion about, and the sample is the specific group of individuals that you will collect data from. The population can be defined in the term of geographical location, age, income, and many other characteristics. Third is sampling frame. The sampling frame is the actual list of individuals that the sample will be drawn from. Ideally, it should include the entire target population and nobody who is not part of that population. Example, you are doing research on working conditions at company X and your population is all 1,000 employees of the company. Their sampling frame is the company HR database which lists the name and contact details of every employee. The next is probability sampling method. Probability sampling means that every member of the population has a chance of being selected. It is mainly used in a quantitative research. If you want to produce results that are representative of the whole population, you need to use a probability sampling technique. And you see the picture. There are 4 main types of probability sample. The first is simple random sampling. In a simple random sample, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Your sampling frame should include the whole population. To conduct this type of sampling, you can use tools like random number generator or other techniques that are based entirely on the change. Example, you want to select a simple random sample of 15 employees of company X. We assign a number to every 15 employee in the company database from 1 until 50 and use a random number generator to select 15 number. Number 2 is systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is similar to simple random sampling, but it is usually slightly easier to conduct. Every member of the population is listed with a number, but instead of randomly generated numbers, individuals are chosen at regular intervals. For example, all employees of the company are listed in alphabetical order. From the first 10 number, you randomly select a starting point number 6 onward. So every 10% on the list is selected, which is 6, 16 to 26, 36, and so on. The third is stratified sampling. Stratified sampling improves dividing the population into subpopulations that may differ in important ways. It allows you to draw more precise conclusions by ensuring that every subgroup is properly represented in the sample. To use this sampling method, you divide the population into subgroups called strata based on the relevant characteristics. Example: gender, age, range, income bracket, job role, and many others. For example, the company has 18 female employees and 200 male employees. You want to ensure that the sample reflects the gender balance of the company, so you sort of the population into two strata based on the gender. It means selected 18 female and 2 female. And next, a cluster sampling. Cluster sampling also involves dividing the population into subgroups, but each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample. Instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select entire subgroup. For example, the company has offices in 10 cities across the country. You don't have the capacity to travel to every office to collect your data. You just use random sampling to select 3 offices. There are your cluster. 5. Non-probability sampling method. In a probability sample, individuals are selected based on random criteria, and not every individual has a chance of being included. This type of sample is easier and cheaper to access, but it has a higher risk of sampling bias, and you can't use it to make valid statistical inference about the whole population. Non-probability sampling techniques are often appropriate for exploratory and qualitative research. In this type of research, the aim is not to test a hypothesis about a broad population, but to develop an initial understanding of a small or under-researched population. There are 4 main types of non-probability sample. The first is convenience sampling. The convenience sample simply include the individual who happen to be most accessible to researchers. This is an easy and inexpensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is representative of the population, so it can't produce generalizable results. Second, voluntary response sampling. Similar to convention sample, a voluntary response sample is mainly based on ease of access. Instead of the researcher choosing participants and directly contacting them, people volunteer themselves, example by responding to a public online survey. The third is proposing sampling. This type of sampling involves the researchers using their judgment to select a sample that is most useful to the purposes of the research. This is often used in quantitative research, where the researchers want to gain detailed knowledge about a specific phenomenon rather than make statistical inference. An effective propositive sample must have clear criteria and rationale for inclusion. And last is snowball sampling. If the population is hard to access, snowball sampling it can be used to recruit participants to via other participants. The number of people, you have access to snowball as you get in contact with more people. And the last is difference between probability sampling and non-probability sampling method. Definition: probability sampling method is a sampling technique in which samples from a large population are chosen using a method based on the theory of probability. And for non-probability sampling is sampling techniques in which the researcher selects samples based on the researcher's subjective judgment rather than random collection, alternatively known as for probability sampling method is random sampling method, and then non-random sampling method for non-probability sampling method. Population selection for probability sampling method is the population is selected randomly, and the population is selected arbitrarily for non-probability sampling method. Nature: the result inconclusive. For probability sampling method, the research is exploratory. For non-probability sampling method, the sample size: there is a method for deciding a sample. The population demographic are conclusively represented for probability sampling method, and for non-probability sampling method, for sample, since the sampling method is arbitrary, the population demographic representation is almost always skewed. Time taken: take longer to conduct science to research design defining the selection parameter before the market research study begin for probability sampling method, and for non-probability sampling method, time taken is this type of sampling method is quick since neither the sample or selection criteria of the sample are undefined. And result: this type of sampling is entirely unbiased, and hence the results are unbiased to and conclusive for probability sampling method. This type of sampling is entirely biased, and hence the results are biased too, rendering the research speculative for non-probability sampling method. And the last, hypothesis. In probability sampling, there is an underlying hypothesis before the study begins, and the objective of this method is to prove the hypothesis. In probability sampling, the hypothesis is verified after conducting the research study. I think that's all to explain about my presentation. Thank you for watching this. See you next week. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.